I walk through these outdoor halls in the late spring, like I have done every year. I like it here. It feels like a second home that I have grown up with. I know the people, talk to most of them, and feel fairly comfortable with the life I live. So comfortable, I barely even have to think about living it. It's what I've always done, and so going through the motions of it feels natural. For the most part, I get to be around people who believe and think the same as myself, and who have similar perspectives. I fit in just fine, and I rarely encounter people who would oppose my beliefs. Likewise, I would never dare to oppose anyone else's. Soon, I begin to see and interact with people who believe, live, and think differently than myself. Are they wrong? Am I wrong? These are questions that I had never thought about before these moments my freshman year. To be honest, in this crisis, I realized that I never really thought about the reason for my beliefs. When was the last time you thought about what forms yours? You see, our lives are filled with constant busyness going on all around us. Throughout the day, thoughts are constantly flowing in and out of your mind, whether you recognize it or not. These thoughts and interactions represent our opinions, perspectives, and feelings, and they are a very important part of who you are. Conflict can often get in the way of communicating these thoughts with our own mind, with others, and with God. Conflict is exhausting and requires effort to try and resolve. We tend to steer away from it because it seems to threaten our need for love and belonging. If we avoid conflict, we can get in the habit of avoiding anything that could potentially lead to it instead of dealing with situations in a healthy way. This, in a way, is a temporary substitute for peace, but it actually can steer us further away from the love and belonging we need. People can ignore many categories of thought or emotion, but conflict is one myself and many others commonly struggle with. Ignorance and avoidance of our mind and how it works can lead to a lukewarm way of life, lived without passion. Honest evaluation concerning your mind and thoughts can help you have a healthy relationship with yourself, others, and God. Before you can achieve a fruitful relationship with others, you must have one with yourself. Every one of us is wired different. Everyone has an internal world that helps them interact with the external one. This is frequently inspired by the way we are raised. Many Christians since birth are taught to love others as themselves. Oftentimes, this gets confused with trying to love others more than ourselves. When we try to love others more than we think we are loved, we abandon our thoughts and we can undermine our significance. If we compare ourselves to others in this way, it can create a bad habit of not being able to accurately listen to yourself. Many times in my life, I've caught myself following this train of thought. If I loved or cared for someone, I thought I had to abandon my values and beliefs to prove how much they were loved. This led to a cycle of feeling like I never did enough for people, which harbors guilt and confusion within your mind. I was seeking to love others before myself, while not recognizing the value God has given to me specifically. In turn, this makes it harder for you to live in the moment and value those around you for who they truly are. When we see the value and worth we have, we can then begin to love others better. Christians are called to serve and love one another deeply, but that also requires us to know that God loves us deeply. In the book Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis touches on how we are loved by God and why. He states that this is how he loves us, not for any attractive qualities we think we have, but just because we are things called selves. God intends to love all selves the same, and we are all created in his image. When you do not recognize your self-worth, you can become mentally crippled, not knowing what you truly want or need. As individuals, we can never truly belong if we are betraying ourselves, our values, or our ideals in the process. This is why, when you make an effort to think about things and set aside time to feel, you see that relationships become more prosperous and you have a passion for more things. In the Great Books Class 2 at MCA, we read the book Fahrenheit 451, in which there's a peculiar young girl named Clarice. She is labeled as different because she chooses to think about life instead of just going through the motions of it. She is described in the book as embarrassing because she didn't want to know how a thing was done, but why. Clarice wanted to know why they did certain things and why they lived the way they did. Because she wanted to know these things about society, she intentionally lived her life in a different and in a more fulfilling way. She developed a habit of thinking about the true meaning of things, as opposed to nearly the rest of society, who just did as they were told and didn't even question it. Instead of going along with society, Clarice had confidence in her way of thinking. She is an example of someone who developed a healthy relationship with self. To have a healthy relationship with yourself, you need to have a certain amount of confidence, the ability to be honest with yourself, and the awareness of what the world around you is feeding you. When you are able to think for yourself and formulate beliefs, you can then begin to empathize with others and seek to understand things from their point of view. Sharing your mind can be a complicated idea. It is important to recognize the difference between truth and opinion. Truth is able to be demonstrably proven to a reasonable and rational person. However, just because something cannot be proven does not disqualify it from being true. But even if somebody is fully confident that something they think is true, if it cannot be proven, they must accept that others may view that as an opinion. Opinion is a personal preference or something you choose to believe, but does not have enough evidence to line up with a universal reality. God can use the thoughts and emotions you have for good, and a majority of the time, it is beneficial to share those with others. However, in matters of opinion, it is important to recognize that even reasonable and well-educated people come to different conclusions, and that does not negate the need to show respect for one another. As humans, we don't want to be rejected by those we love. Honesty can cause pain and be uncomfortable for everyone involved. If this is the case, is it always necessary to be honest in relationships? When sharing truths that challenge what others believe, it can lead to questions and doubts about the way you live your life. In Matthew 7:3-5, it states, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take that speck out of your eye,' when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's." I have had a hard time that I have the obligation or authority to share truth with others because I am not a perfect human being myself. It is hard to be honest with others when you desperately don't want to seem offensive or intrusive. For this reason, it can be seen as more beneficial to not even address the disagreement. When we are honest in an aggressive and blaming way, we just push people away by our honesty. Because of the pain honesty can bring about, it can be seen as more beneficial to not address it. But, in the end, it is more healthy. Truth is healthy, and discussing that with other people is healthy. You can share truth in a loving way when you are more concerned about the person you are sharing truth with than proving you are right. You grow greatly when you consider how the other person came to believe what they believe. When you shy away from conflict and honest conversations about truth because you fear offending someone or experiencing discomfort yourself, you take away the opportunity to help someone grow in their life or yourself in their life and in their faith. In preparation for my thesis, I interviewed counselor Mr. Mark McQueen. He emphasized, the order of the conversation matters. If I come in and just hammer what I believe to be true, and they believe the opposite, then it is unproductive. Mr. McQueen says, you have to give them a chance to tell you how they got to the point of belief they are at. Whenever there's a disagreement or discussion of differing opinions, it is important to try to recognize how the other person arrived at their conclusion. He says if both people are just listening to argue, then it doesn't build the relationship. And building a relationship should be at the forefront of your mind when conversations like these arise. The most important aspect of these conversations is actually listening to the other person and trying to connect with them in some way. In the book The Atlas of the Heart by Brené Brown, it touches on this. Connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from their relationship. When you actively listen to somebody, you form connections with them. Likewise, when you ask someone questions about what their world is like, you take the pressure off of yourself about assuming something about their life. One of the main ways the Holy Spirit communicates with people is through their mind. When you block out your thoughts, you tend to just mindlessly follow others or live in a way that just goes through the motions. A lot of the time, this seems like an easier way to live, but when you dig deeper, it is meaningless. Doing things without thought, emotion, or reason is meaningless. It kills the passion God has put inside you, and it keeps you from engaging in fruitful conversations with others. God has allowed us to feel and think because it is good and beautiful, and He has allowed us to feel and think differently for a reason. In the book Fahrenheit 451, society is taught that they all need to operate in the same way. It states, "We must all be alike, not everyone born of free and equal, as the Constitution says, but made equal, each man in the image of every other. Then all are happy." If you have read the book, you know how much damage this can do to the individual and to their society. When you confine yourself to being like everyone else, you limit the freedom God has given you. You do not need and were not made to be like everyone else. You were made to be different and learn how to discuss those in a good way. If you can learn to discuss your differences in a healthy way, it can lead to a stronger community and stronger relationships with others. When it comes to a relationship with God, there are many different ways people go about this. God wants us to pursue a relationship with Him, but sometimes it's hard to feel like He's pursuing one with us. David is known as a man after God's own heart. He's known as having a good relationship with God. Throughout the Psalms, we see his struggle and his praise. In Psalm 102, 1-2, David writes, "Hear my prayer, O Lord. Let my cry come to you. Do not hide your face from me in the day of my distress. Incline your ear to me and answer me speedily in the day when I call." Throughout David's life, it is seen quite often that he reaches out for God and waits for an answer. Too often in our lives, instead of continuing to wait and listen for God, we turn to earthly distractions and try to forget about the hardship in the first place. When we are not willing to sit and wait in discomfort, it takes God's chance to even give a response away, because we already decided it wasn't worth listening to. A strong faith in God does come with questions. Questioning your faith is reasoning through your beliefs and pursuing an answer. I have experienced a lot of questioning, and some have been answered, but some have not, and that's okay. Questioning can be a frustrating process because you don't know when you will get an answer, if you will get an answer, or if you will even like what you receive. But the important thing is to go about this with an open mind. This helps us seek truth without putting God into a box. When questioning, it is also important to get different perspectives. Like I said, well-educated and reasonable people disagree, and that's not a bad thing. In the Christian culture, questioning and doubt can often be viewed as faithless, but I would argue that it is healthy and good for someone to want to discover truth, even if that changes what their current beliefs are. Theoretical physicist Einstein once quoted, "The important thing is to never stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existence. One cannot help but be in awe when he contemplates the mysteries of eternity, of life, of the marvelous structure of reality. It is enough if one merely tries to comprehend a little of this mystery every day." Einstein points out that if you are curious and lean into questioning, you can actually discover the more important and amazing things this life and God have to offer. I have let many of my questions about my faith lead me straight down a path of negative doubting. This caused me to think that if I wanted to believe in something, I had to have concrete evidence it existed. And this pushed me towards being overwhelmed all at once by the questions of life. To come out of this mindset, you have to remind yourself of the things you do know about life and you do know about God. You also have to make an effort to wonder about answers, instead of just plainly doubting them. To be curious about things, question them, instead of just deciding not to believe in them. Wonder helps us listen to God while trying to discover more about our life. Wonder is the desire to be curious and in awe of something simultaneously. Brene Brown writes, "Choosing to be curious is choosing to be vulnerable because it requires us to surrender to uncertainty. We have to ask questions, admit not knowing, risk being told we shouldn't be asking, and sometimes make discoveries that lead to discomfort. So to seek truth in a productive way, we need to be open to discussing questions and doubts that may make us uncomfortable." In Matthew 19:14, Jesus says, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." Children have many attractive qualities about them that could lead Jesus to make this statement. I would argue that the first one is because they are curious. They start with an open mind, and through curiosity, they seek truth. They are willing to ask Jesus questions and truly listen to what he has to say. Secondly, they can often be caught in awe of new, beautiful, and exciting things. They do not have the distraction of worldly responsibility to take this away from them. They see things and are filled with what we call childlike wonder. As we grow older, we are bound to leave curiosity, awe, and wonder behind, because they can lead to disappointment and finding out things you didn't really want to know. We forget the joys of these childlike traits in order to protect our pride. In the book, The Alice of the Heart, it shows that in reality, when we choose to think in these ways, you actually cooperate better with others, sacrifice more for others, and better see the value of others. To truly know God, you have to share your praises with Him, as well as your questions and doubts, your curiosities, and your cries. Looking at God and at life through a lens of awe and wonder can lead you better to appreciate and listen to Him. By asking questions and being honest about what you believe and why, you can form a more honest relationship with God that has a stronger built foundation. Honest communication with your mind, with others, and with God can be a time-consuming and difficult thing. It can be confusing and easier to lean into ignorance and avoidance. But people are made to be in communion with others. We are made to go through life as a group of people, not alone. Jesus had 12 best friends, and He was honest with them. He cried with and for them. He laughed with them. He let them question Him. And He told them when He needed time away or when He was hurt by them. The result of having honest relationships reaps many benefits. It fuels passion within yourself. It allows you to rely on God in a more virtuous way. Thank you.
Great job, Callie.
Thank you.
All right, so I'll go with the stereotypical questions to begin with. What are your plans for next year?
So I'm going to ACU in the fall, and yeah.
Okay. What are you going to major in?
Child and family services. I'm hoping to get a job as a child life specialist.
Okay. So it's obvious that this topic is pretty important to you. Do you see any ways that your topic relates to what you're wanting to study at college?
I think in child and family services, it has a lot to do with psychology. You take a lot of psychology classes. And I think that heavily does have to do with my topic of like how communication is healthy for your mind and for others, and how to do that effectively. Also, in that job, it's you're kind of counseling people / like just like being with families, and obviously that has to do with like communicating with people. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So jumping into your paper, on page 2, you say, many Christians are taught since birth to love others as ourselves. This is a good and true principle. Christians are called to love others as themselves. Nonetheless, this can easily be confused with loving others more than themselves. And so, as I was thinking about that, I was drawn to Philippians 2:3, which says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. And so, can you just help me kind of reconcile what's being said in Philippians with, what you're saying to not be confused with loving others more than you love yourself?
Yeah. So what I was saying, I guess what the verse is saying is you need to do nothing out of selfish ambition. So serve others, and put them above yourself. But I think you have to recognize your ability to do that, and you have to have kind of a mindset of like, I'm valuable. I'm as valuable to God as this other person is, and in that way I can serve them without taking the value away from myself. Like my identity is not, I don't have an identity that's less than them because my identity is in God. But if it wasn't in God and I was trying to serve someone else constantly, then that would kind of be like pouring from an empty cup, which in the end I don't think really helps anyone.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think people struggle with putting their personal identities or personal values in just helping other people?
For myself, and I think for others too, it's when you help someone, it's easily seen by other people. And I think that's kind of like a people pleaser thing to do. So you're seen as serving others and as putting them above yourself. And that's, I think a lot of times people get praised for that. And so, That's
So-
why it's easy to put your identity in like doing that kind of stuff.
So this motivation of wanting other people to see what I'm doing, and so that's why I'm doing these things. That's why I'm being helpful. So how do we go about watching what our motivations are? If I have a bad motivation like that, does that mean that I just shouldn't do something to help another person?
I think it's still important to try to help people and not hurt them. But I think like your motivation behind it is very important. I think when you see another person as, oh, this person is created beautifully and in God's image, it's a lot easier to serve them from that motivation than I'm going to serve them so everyone around me can see how good I'm being and how good of a Christian I am.
Okay. So you've done a fair bit of traveling, right? So you've flown on some planes. So when you get on a plane and you get all comfortable in your seat, what is it that the flight attendants kind of run? What's the process that they run you through?
Like buckling up.
Okay, so buckle up, right? And so if they say in the catastrophic event that our plane starts to go down, all right, what's supposed to drop from the ceiling?
A face mask.
A face mask, right? And so what do they tell you to do with the face mask?
Apply yours and then put it on other people.
Okay, apply yours and then apply it to somebody else. All right, why do they tell you that?
Because if you don't do that, then you might both pass out. And so if you have a child sitting next to you and you apply theirs, they're fine, but they can't help you put yours on after you're already passed out. You can help put theirs on.
Yeah. So how does that apply to what you're talking about here?
I think maybe it has to relate to being able to see your value in your gifts, and so you can use those in a good way to serve others. If you don't recognize what you're good at and what you're bad at, then it's a lot harder to serve others with those gifts.
Yeah, and I was thinking about it from the standpoint of, it's important for us to take care of ourselves, right? And so obviously we're supposed to serve others, we're supposed to love other people, but if I'm not taking care of myself, how am I supposed to be of any help to anybody else, right? And so, if you're in the middle of the ocean, okay, and your ship went down and you're drowning, if you're drowning, how are you supposed to help anybody else who might be drowning as well? Right? The only way you can be of any use to anybody else is if you're in a lifeboat, right? Then I can actually start to try to help other people. Okay. All right. You also mention C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity, one of my favorite authors and one of my favorite books. And so in there, you mention this quote. You say, "That is how he loves us, not for any attractive qualities we think we have, but just because we are the things called selves." Okay, so what is it about being a self that is what makes God love us?
I think that kind of goes back to us being created like in his image and being created with a soul and with like a higher purpose. And so he can love us because he created us to be in a relationship with him. And so he has that part of us to love.
So knowing that the reason he loves us is because we're created in his image, how does that then, or how should that then influence us as we go into the rest of the world and we're trying to live in community with other selves? Yeah.
I think that should give us, I think like Madison said in her oral, I think that should give us a lot of confidence. A lot of confidence about how to talk to others. And then also, like, you need to remember that they were also created the same as you, no matter what they're like, what their beliefs are, any of that stuff. They're still created the same as you. And so I think because of that, if you have that mindset, it could be easier to treat others like they were.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Great job, Callie.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about communication and being honest in that communication. So You talked about it's important to be honest with yourself, to be honest with God, and to be honest with others. So I want to know which of those needs to come first, or if it matters.
I think when you're being honest with any of those three, there's a relationship involved, and in the end, you are half of that relationship. And so I don't know if that means I don't think that's like, oh, you're more important than God or you're more important than other people. But I think you are half of that relationship. And so I think if you're faulty on your end, then it can cause you to be faulty in other places too. But I also think that if you do have a relationship with God, that can help you with your relationship with yourself and with others. So I think that can help you grow in those different areas more.
So are you saying that maybe the self and God comes first and is more important? Or
I don't think
or do you think they're all equally
I think they're
important?
all equal. I'm tempted to say that the one with God's like more important than the one with others, because that seems like the right answer, but I don't have a good explanation for it.
I mean, I've thought about this clearly, so I have an answer, but assuming that my answer is the right answer is pretty dangerous.
I think if you don't focus a little bit on yourself, and like there can't just be like since we have souls, we're able to have a relationship with God. He's not going to have a relationship with something like soul. I don't know if this makes sense. Soulless. And so like you need to focus, like you are half of that relationship. And so I think
that does make sense to me,
okay.
What you're saying, that like you're part of, you're half of that.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm wondering though is like if you are dishonest with yourself, or you never even take the time to evaluate yourself and your beliefs like you talk about, can you be honest with other people? Can you be honest with God if you are not honest with yourself?
I don't think so, because that just like, I mean, if it's deep rooted, that's going to like affect everything in your life, all your relationships. And so with that in mind, you talk about having a relationship with yourself, and quite honestly, I get it, but it sounds a little weird. Like, are you going to say, "Hey, do you want to go out to lunch today? Let's go." So what does that look like to have a relationship with yourself? Yeah, I can see how that would look weird. I didn't mean like you are two different people trying to have
I know that
connections. But
I was being silly.
I think like more so means you know how to think about your thoughts and your emotions, and I think your opinions and beliefs. You know how to sort through those and figure out why you have those certain things, and I think that's more of like a good relationship with yourself.
So do you have some tools that you use or anything that you go through to do that?
I like to journal. I think that helps.
And so do you set aside time for that?
I'm actually really bad about setting aside time for that. Especially like during the school year. I think I'm better at it when there's not as much going on. I'm really good about it at camps when they take my phone away and they don't let me do anything else. And I think that's like the time in my life where I do have the best relationship with myself. But I am writing a lot more in those weeks than I am at any other.
And so do you think like, just like if I want a friendship with somebody else, it requires time.
Right.
And so is it important to try to find a way to set aside time to sit down and be honest with yourself?
I think that's very important.
Yeah. And I agree with you. You talk about busyness, and there's a lot of distractions in the world, and so I think that sometimes does keep us from doing that. But I do think that's a real important practice. And that's easy for me to say because I'm an introvert, and so I'm just fine being by myself. I wonder if that's like harder for extroverted people.
I mean, I don't know if I'm an introvert or an extrovert. I think I definitely used to be more extroverted, and I never did things by myself. I hated doing things by myself. So I think that definitely could be a little bit harder.
Yeah. So kind of along those same lines of like communication, what are the things that you think are necessary in order for effective communication to occur?
With other people?
Yes.
I think both people need to be trying to understand the other person before blaming the other person. I think that's really important. And I think things that you can do from your standpoint would be like trying to listen to the other person. And I think it's also effective if you know why you believe certain things and you're able to accurately tell them why.
Yeah, so it requires some skills, like listening. Mm-hmm. But you didn't use this word, but you said this. It also requires some self-awareness. Mm-hmm. So again, if I don't have self-awareness and I'm having a conversation with somebody else, it seems like that will never really work out for the best. Mm-hmm. And again, to be self-aware, I have to have been honest with myself. So it feels like, again, I don't know if that really is the most important, but it feels like it's really an important thing to take time to do that, and we just don't do a lot of that in our culture. This is going to be my last question for this moment. So back to the busyness thing. Do you think because we're busy, we don't take the time to be honest with ourselves, or we don't want to take the time to be honest with ourselves so we stay busy?
I think that can be different for different people. Like some people who are just like naturally really busy and have a lot going on, maybe they aren't honest with themselves because of the fact that they're busy. For myself, I like to fill my time up with things, and so I don't have to sit and think about the deep questions of life. So for myself, it would probably be making myself busy.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Great job, Callie.
Thank you.
All this talk about tension and conflict has made me pretty uneasy up here. I was really glad the air conditioner came back on. I was starting to get sweaty. So, and just watching the mic get closer and closer to me, it's like, I have to talk about tension. It's the worst. So, have you, as a teenage girl, had to provide comfort to someone in the last week?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Describe that process. You don't have to name any names, but what happened and what did you do?
I'm trying to remember my week.
I thought it maybe just happened every day, so it would just be like...
or you could go to... with orals, okay. I mean, everyone's kind of worried about orals. I think... I don't know about guys, but I think girls get more nervous about orals, and that can be something that, myself included, needs comfort on. Mm-hmm. And reassurance that you're going to do good. Okay.
So it's... They feel some kind of conflict or tension. You say it's going to be okay. They feel better about things. Okay. Mm-hmm. Do you think there's some... do you think that thing that you just described of comforting someone, is that different than that person being comfortable?
I think when you're comforting somebody, you're trying to get them away from like distress. But when you're just comfortable, you're kind of just sitting in. I mean, I don't know how else to describe comfort. Like, is that what you mean?
I guess. I mean, Mr. Nelson described earlier when you are sitting on an airplane and you're getting yourself comfortable. Or I think when I'm, after this oral, I'm going to go home and put my feet up and probably get on Instagram. And so I'm wondering if my seeking of being comfortable is any different than providing comfort to someone else.
Oh, I think it is. When you're providing comfort for someone else, I think you're trying to seek things, like I said, trying to see things from their point of view, and then thinking about ways that could, something that you could do could make them feel better. When you're seeking comfort for yourself, I think you can already see, it's easier to see those things. Like you said, we can just go get in bed or do something for ourselves. But when you're trying to communicate that with someone else, you have to take into account their emotions, what makes them them, and how they're going to react to what you say.
Okay.
So it's a lot more stressful to be the comforter than just going to seek comfort yourself.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I thought this was an interesting way you phrased this on your first page of your paper. I think it was on your speech too. You changed a few things, and so I had to keep flipping back and forth to keep up with you. So you said when you avoid conflict, people can get into the habit of just ignoring things that could lead to conflict instead of dealing with them in a healthy way. This, in a way, I guess the ignoring of conflict, is a temporary substitute for peace. Why would you call that a substitute for peace when you ignore it? Or when you ignore the conflict?
I think because when you are in conflict, that makes you feel emotional and defensive, and those are things we wouldn't put with the word peace. But I would call it a temporary substitute for peace because you're kind of just numbing your mind to things you need to think about or need to go through. Say I have a big calculus test tomorrow. If I know I'm going to fail it, then my temporary substitute for peace would just be going out and hanging out with friends because I already know I'm going to fail it. And so if I just sat at home and thought about it, then I definitely would not be at peace. But if I went out and hung out with friends, then that would feel more like peace. But really, it's just blocking out things that you probably should think about.
Sure. Do you think it's possible for you to have peace or to grow without conflict?
I think it's probably possible, but it's a lot harder to get motivated to grow or find ways to grow. Because when you're comfortable, you're usually just going to stay in the state of life that you are in. But if there's conflict, you're trying to seek resolution to something, which would lead you somewhere.
Why do you think God has set it up in that way that, for the most part, the way that we grow is through pain or tension?
I think that helps us love each other on a different level. If you have to have conflict with someone and still love them, I think that's a deeper level of love than just being able to be comfortable with someone and love them. That, I don't know if that's the whole thing. I don't know why he did that, but that would be something that I could assume.
So do you think that the right attitude with God as you experience discomfort or pain is thankfulness?
I mean, maybe.
I guess I'm trying to maybe get some justification for if my math students should be thankful when I put pain in their life.
Maybe they should be thankful that you're trying to make them smarter.
I don't get thanked very often.
I'm sorry. Should send you more fun GIFs.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You should. Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm going to piggyback off of all of this talk of conflict because I enjoy the talk of conflict. So In what ways does conflict threaten our love and belonging?
This is something that I actually read in that book, The Alice of the Heart. And I think it can go back in history kind of a little bit. If you were at conflict with someone, maybe like in a tribe or something, you're threatened to get kicked out of the tribe. That like threatens your livelihood. Mm-hmm. So I think it could go back to there. With us, like modern day or in this, like at MCA, it could threaten maybe your friends not agreeing with you, and that's kind of scary because you don't know if they're going to like you after that or not. You kind of want reassurance of what you believe, but if they don't agree with you, they're not going to give you reassurance on that.
So this fear of exile, mm-hmm. right, of being kicked out, which, you talk about ancient times. It's like the stakes were so much higher, right, because everything you've ever known is in that community that you've grown up in. And so if you get exiled, get kicked out of that community, it's like, that's it, right? You're banished from everything and everyone that you've ever known. Okay? So you also talk about ignoring conflict, with which Mr. Priya touched on. Do you think that ignoring conflict, we do it for temporary peace, but does ignoring conflict actually just set us up for even worse conflict down the road?
I think it can. With the pre-cal example I gave, like maybe you would get a better grade on it if you stayed home and at least studied a tiny bit, even if you knew you were going to fail. That's just like a tiny example. Mm-hmm. I think there could be more, but...
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ignore the conflict of having to go to Mr. Priya's office and get help. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just going to continue trying to fix the problem myself. And then what happens as time goes on?
Your grades get worse and worse.
Your grades get worse and worse, right? And why does it seem like your grade's getting worse?
Maybe because you don't understand it, because you've tried to just push it away.
Okay, and you keep going back to, I don't want to go to Mr. Priya's office and admit that I have no idea what I'm doing, mm-hmm. right? And so, I'm afraid Mr. Priya, he's really mean, he's going to yell at me. And so... I'm just going to avoid that conflict. But then actually there's this greater conflict because now I'm doing worse and worse in the class. And my parents are probably not real happy with me either because my grade is getting worse and worse in the class. Mm-hmm. And so, we try to avoid this conflict in one area of our life. And then it just introduces new conflicts in other areas of our life.
Right.
Right. And so it seems like if we go and we summon up the courage to address this conflict with Mr. Priya and pre-calculus, suddenly, there's the possibility that now these other conflicts don't have to be there.
Right.
Right.
And I also think with that, like, if you get over that one conflict and go to his office or any tutor's office, you could resolve that and try to understand what you're learning. But I also think that like opens the door to better relationships with that tutor. Mm-hmm. So I think there's more than just there's more than just trying to resolve the conflict that comes out of it.
Wait, why does that open the door for better relationship with Mr. Priya?
Because you're kind of dependent on him. And if you go and admit that you don't understand anything about pre-cal, he has to teach you those things. And also, if he's nice, then you're going to want to spend more time with him. So I think that in that way.
Okay, all right. And so it actually causes, kind of the point that Mr. Priya was getting at before, it causes this personal growth for you, right? Mm-hmm. And it can even cause personal growth for him, right? Because he's like, oh my goodness, I've been teaching pre-calculus like this, and I really needed to be teaching it this different way for this student to be able to understand it. And so now both of us have had this opportunity to grow. And neither of us would have known that if conflict had never taken place. Mm-hmm. And so can you describe for me some other ways that conflict is actually a good thing?
I think it creates more variety. So in like a classroom sense, if there's a disagreement and you don't address it, then there could be other people in that class that do actually agree with you. And you would never know that because you didn't address the disagreement in the first place. But if you address it, I mean, the whole class may be against you. But I think there's a bigger chance of someone actually relating to you and feeling more understood than they did before.
Mm-hmm. How boring would books be, or movies, any form of media really, without conflict?
Very boring.
Right? Right? Without conflict, without Sauron and the Ring of Power and all the things that Frodo has to do, there would be no story. Right? And so you look at all the great stories that we read, and there's these big moments of conflict, and we kind of, us as the reader, there's some moments where we're really into the book and we kind of are dreading the conflict that's taking place, and we're saying, oh my goodness, how is the hero going to overcome this? Mm-hmm. Right? And yet, without that conflict, we can't have those beautiful stories. Right? And without that conflict, we wouldn't see how the heroes of the stories changed. Mm-hmm. So thinking about The Hobbit, which I'll read at MCA, without conflict, Bilbo never leaves the Shire. He never grows. He never learns about anything beyond himself. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a lesson in there somewhere for all of us in regards to dealing with conflict in our own lives. And that's the only way for any of us to ever grow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got one more question about conflict, then I'm kind of switching topics. So, I want to help Mr. Pre over here by switching. So, have you ever known people who have had conflict and it destroyed their relationship?
Yes.
And have you ever known people who have had conflict and it brought them closer?
Yes.
So what do you think the difference is?
I think when I was talking about the difference between truth and opinion, if people fail to recognize that other people see truth differently as themselves, it's a lot harder to come out with a good relationship with that person if you end up disagreeing in the end. Or if somebody doesn't comply and go to the other side, sometimes people think that relationship needs to not continue. I don't think that's the case. I think you just need to be able to understand the other person's side and not, maybe if you've already addressed that with them, not address it again unless it's actively hurting them or hurting someone else. But I think there's definitely good ways to have good relationships with people you disagree with.
In fact, maybe better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they might be better. Do you think that, what if the cause of conflict stems from the fact that maybe my expectations on you as a human are too high? Like if I'm finding my identity in my friendship with you, mm-hmm. and you disappoint me, is that different than if we're both relying on God for our identity and then we have conflict?
Yes, I think that's very different. If you are putting your identity in someone else and then you have conflict with them, you could feel like your world is shattered. But if you put it in something higher like God, He's not going, like your world's not going to be shattered just because you disagree with somebody.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's often the source of a lot of our conflict. Like we're just putting unrealistic expectations, or we're putting our hopes in those people instead of in something higher. Now I'm switching. All right. Yeah, I think you kind of answered this in your paper, but I want you to elaborate on it. So, do you think in order to really have a faith that is deep, that you have to doubt?
No, but I think you have to question certain things. I talked about negative doubting, and that's just deciding not to believe anything that doesn't have concrete evidence. I think you won't have a faith if you decide to doubt that way. But I think if you question, sometimes you need to question things in order to have a deep faith. In apologetics this year, we went over like a ton of different religions, and which like does cause a lot of questioning. But I think since people do question those things, or like question, why does this person believe this, but I believe this? If you don't question why you believe something, you're not gonna have as strong as a foundation. Unless you just like grew up from the very beginning being like knowing exactly why you believed everything you believed.
It doesn't seem like that would probably happen to too many people.
I don't think so.
And you kind of answer this too. I think this might be what you mean by having negative doubts. Like, what's like the flip side if like you believe nothing and you question everything? Like, what do you think life is like in that case?
I think it's like very hopeless. If you question everything and you believe nothing, I think that could, there's some philosopher that talks, he's like that type of person, like existentialist or something.
Maybe skeptic?
Yeah. But it goes down to like, you even have to question your own being. And I don't think you can spend all your time questioning every single little thing you know. I don't think that leads to a joyful life.
Do you think community could function that way?
No.
Yeah, I recently read a book, and the whole kind of premises of it is that our instinct is to trust each other and believe each other, because without that, there would be no community. Mm-hmm. And I think that you've said that, in your paper. All right, thank you.
This time has gone really fast. So I haven't heard you laugh very much. I'm going to try to get you laughing. So you talked at the end of your paper about like childlike wonder. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if you had inspiration for that with a person in your life or people in your life who embodies this childlike wonder that you talked about.
One is my sister. She's a child.
Oh, yeah.
So, she is asleep right now.
It's because there wasn't enough laughing, so we lost her about an hour ago.
But she's very quick to like come up and hug me after a day and say like, "How's your day? What did you do?" Just like ask questions, and she's like willing to listen to whatever I have to say.
Mm-hmm. So you read the passage in Matthew 19 when Jesus says, "Let the little children come to me." Mm-hmm. Who was he talking to when he said that?
The disciple?
Yeah, and what were the disciples doing?
They were trying to get the children away from him.
Yeah, so I was hoping you might have a good story, like, as parents tend to shush their children. You got any good Mariel stories that your parents were like, "I can't believe you just did that or said that"? Sorry, guys.
Our kids are too good.
Yeah, okay, they don't misbehave. Okay.
The boys do.
Yeah, okay. Oh, I'd actually like to hear that. For maybe Eli would be a better one to hear this about. So.
It's okay. No, but there's definitely been times I've shushed Mariel, and then I felt bad about it because she's like so open to wanting to know everything about my life, mm-hmm. or like have fun, or go do something outside, and it's just when I'm like, no, I can't do that right now. Yeah.
So how do you keep that? How do you keep the innocence of Mariel as you gain adult responsibilities, or as you see that the world is a broken place? Like what do you do to hold on to that?
I think one thing is being willing to do things that normally people don't do, like maybe go, I think, like watch the stars. Like normally people are too busy to do that, or go play in the rain, or go like hike a mountain. I think the outdoors helps with that a lot, because you can see how small you are in comparison to everything, and how silly a lot of the things we do are. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe you have to do some of the things that Clarice did that mm-hmm. made other people uncomfortable around her, like, can't you stop asking, or can't you just fit in? And it is risky to do that, because you might risk exile, as Mr. Nelson was talking about earlier. So Gosh, I'd love to keep asking you questions, but now it's your turn. So
Perfect.
Yeah, fire at will.
Okay. So I had 3 different questions that really have to relate with nothing. I just was wondering about them. I'll start with you, Mr. Nelson. So you were a senior in high school here and you graduated from here. I would like to know which senior boy you think you're the most like and why.
Well, I think there's only one obvious answer. Jared. I mean, we have the same name. He's an Eagle Scout, and he has a strong affinity for wearing schmediums from time to time.
Okay, good answer. Okay, Miss
I'm now
McQueen.
scared of your question.
You and Mr. McQueen teach our small group class, so I want you to answer for the both of you.
That's dangerous.
If y'all had to be a team and Olympic gold medalists in some sport, what sport would it be and why?
Oh, obviously curling, because we have no other athletic. If we didn't have to be a team, it could be golf, but I would destroy that. So other than the golf ability, we have no athletic ability. So it would have to be something like curling.
Okay. I believe in y'all. Okay, Mr. Perea, I know you have a really good relationship with heights and cliffs.
Too soon. Jeez.
So, if you were to go paragliding off of any national park in the U.S., or actually anywhere, national park, where would it be?
Well, I'm having difficulty deciding between 2. Denali would be. You couldn't really top it, since it's the highest point in North America. I don't know if you can even paraglide in at 20,000 feet. Maybe there's a reason why people don't. So I could do the biggest. So that's probably why I would pick that. But if I wasn't trying to win the game, I would probably pick Haleakala, which is the highest or one of the highest points in Hawaii. And it would just be really fun to paraglide looking out over the Pacific Ocean, assuming that it would all, that my oxygen mask would deploy at the right time and those things.
Do you think you would paraglide if you got a chance?
I think I would. Yeah, it's. I guess, like you said about Muriel or about maintaining childlike wonder, you have to take risks, and life's more fun if you're living dangerously, and that does get me into trouble. Exhibit A. Yeah, I think I would. Would you?
Probably.
Yeah.
I think that would be cool.
Okay. Well,
we should go on a paragliding trip.
Haleakala, let's go. So let's change where the senior trip goes. So I don't know if
I just think you should take your panel.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, paragliding at Galveston, I don't think it would have the same. It wouldn't have the same luster. So I like that. You could have picked a lot of books to talk about in your oral, and I guess you did talk about a lot of books. But I like that you picked Fahrenheit 451 because I think in a lot of ways you embody Clarice. So hopefully. You don't come to the same end that Clarice did, that she didn't have any friends and made people uncomfortable and all those things. But you do ask why. You do dig. You ask about things that matter. You're willing to face things that are uncomfortable and to seek reconciliation and relationship with people. And you said it at the end of your paper, but it's that is what it means to bring God's kingdom, to live in God's kingdom right now. And so you've modeled that very well, and we're really proud of you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, let me close with some prayer. God, you are good, and you made us for yourself. You made us to be in relationship with ourselves, with others, with you. you model that really well in the way that you interact with us, the way that you are 3 in 1. And God, the more that we can be in line with that, the more we get to experience your fullness and your reality and live in your kingdom. Thank you for just the words that you spoke through Callie's oral today and through her life, God. And may we seek to pursue healthy conflict with the aim of reconciliation and relationship and understanding, so we can know you and live in your world more fully. We pray all this in Christ's name. Amen.